to the Chief of the Air Staff's Global Air and Space Chiefs Conference, day 2. It's been a fantastic day 1. We had so much really insightful, crucial and urgent commentary and analysis about what we need to do to try and cooperate and collaborate together to counter the threats, not just today, but tomorrow as well. Now, I am now delighted to say we're going to be continuing these discussions, and I'm very pleased to say we have the Minister of the Armed Forces, Luke Pollard, here to give us his insights about the UK and how it views the current situation. So please do give the Minister of the Armed Forces, Luke Pollard, a very warm welcome here today. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's a year ago that I last stood in this spot as a new minister. Some of you will not be able to remember me because I have more grey hair than I had, certainly this time last year. But it was a privilege to welcome colleagues from around the world a year ago, and it is a privilege to do exactly the same again today. The Secretary of State sends his apologies that he can't be with us today. Some of you may have spotted there's been some news going on in the UK over the past few days, and he continues to explain the situation that we inherited there. But having worked alongside him in opposition as the Shadow Minister for the Armed Forces now over the last year, I'll do my best to fill his considerable shoes that he has. But let me first begin by saying a few words about Air Chief Marshal Sir Rich Knighton for his incredible service as the Chief of the Air Staff, and now as we look ahead to his new role as Chief of the Defence Staff. Sir Rich has served our nation with considerable distinction for 37 years. Of the 31 individuals who have been CAS since the creation of the RAF in 1918, he has been the first non-pilot to do so, an engineer by trade. In leading the Royal Air Force, he has upheld the highest traditions of respect, integrity and excellence, and he's normally done so with a cheeky smile on his face as well, for those who know him. And at a time when our recent Strategic Defence Review has heralded the beginning of a new era of deterrence and defence, I can think of no one better to lead our people through the critical changes ahead. And congratulations on your fully deserved appointment, Rich. Look forward to carry on working with you. And of course, Rich's boots are not easily filled. And so although there was a very competitive shortlist for the new Chief of the Air Staff, and it was fiercely competitive, we're very fortunate to have an outstanding candidate in Air Marshal Harve Smith as well. Harve, we have urgent and important work to do as we seek to implement the Strategic Defence Review, and I'm going to look forward to continuing to work strongly with all our RAF colleagues. And it was just a year ago we had a general election. It feels in Britain like there's a lot of politics going on at the moment and a lot of change. And that has been a year when defence has rarely been off the front pages. From the conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East to the modernisation of the UK Armed Forces, set in motion not just by the general election, but by the Strategic Defence Review that follows. But what the news headlines don't always show are the efforts and the achievements of the people that stand behind the headlines, that work every single day to protect our nation and our allies, the men and women of our armed forces. And if I look around the room, the collective men and women of our armed forces, from an alliance that spans the globe of friends and allies. Those men and women carry out their duties every single day with superb professionalism and precision. They go above and beyond to keep their nations, our nation, and all our partners safe. And in doing so, they not only create the environment where we can better protect our own homeland from Russian aggression, they are working to support friends and allies the world over. The UK Armed Forces have flown over 500 sorties, for example, and moved 9 million tonnes of freight to help the people and the armed forces of Ukraine. And I'm minded at times like this, when there are so many people in uniform ahead of us, that at this very moment there are brave Ukrainian pilots in the sky above their country, trying to keep Ukraine safe from Putin's illegal aggression. There are brave men and women who I met at the Interstorm graduation for the training of Ukrainian pilots, many of whom were very frank and honest about their chances of survival. That bravery is something that you will know because it's the bravery you see in your own people, but it is something that we, and myself as a politician, need to talk more about, because we spend a lot of our time talking about kit and equipment. And it is absolutely right, and I will do so in the speech as a spoiler alert, but we need to talk more about our people. Notwithstanding autonomy and uncrewed systems, we need to value the men and women who not only serve in the sky, but on the ground, in the laboratories and the workshops that keep our air forces on a global basis the incredible power that they are. It was those brave men and women who also were active recently in the Middle East, evacuating over 220 British nationals and their dependents out of Tel Aviv, including a 3-month-old baby and a 91-year-old pensioner, to protect them from missile attacks. It's particularly important in these times of increasing insecurity that we do recognise that dedication of our people. And that is why, unapologetically, this government talks about renewing the contract between the nation and those who serve. Everyone around the world will have a similar formulation. It may be slightly worded differently, it may be translated in a slightly different word order, but fundamentally, we need our nations to value our people more. And if we can do that, we have a stronger defence by default, even if we spend not a single extra penny on it, because our people are only as strong as a nation that stands behind them. So after awarding the UK service personnel their biggest pay rise for 20 years and giving them another above inflation pay rise this year, we're delivering a generation of renewal of military accommodation with at least £7 billion of funding for this in this Parliament. For those international visitors who have not stayed in some British military accommodation for a while, let me tell you, it is not good enough. That is not good enough for me. It's not good enough for our people, and we are fixing it. And that's why we're going to continue to put our people at the heart of defence unapologetically. And I know that the pace of change of our armed forces in the UK and collectively is matched by many of our international friends who are doing exactly the same. But we're only at the start of the transformation that we need to see in the UK Armed Forces, and the RAF is at the heart of that. The Strategic Defence Review set out our blueprint to reshape and revitalise UK defence in a new geopolitical era of threat. Britain now has an absolutely clear NATO-first defence policy, and it is pivotal to our future security. But it's only right that Europe steps up to take on more of the heavy lifting for its own defence and protection. At the recent Hague summit, European leaders came together and did precisely that. As well as a pledge to spend 5% of GDP on national security, the UK announced the biggest strengthening of our nuclear posture in a generation, including the purchase of a dozen F-35As and a commitment to join NATO's nuclear dual-capable aircraft mission, giving the RAF a nuclear role for the first time since the end of the Cold War, and complementing our own sovereign, continuous at-sea nuclear deterrent, which we declare in full to the defence of NATO. Driving the modernisation of the RAF will be a relentless focus on innovation. For well over a century, the UK has been a leader in shaping and pioneering air power, from the founding of the Royal Flying Corps in 1912 and the new technologies of the interwar years, radar, air defence systems. The Second World War saw air power tested and developed like never before, yet the pace of change did not stop after the peace came. The jet age defined new deterrence in new terms, transforming speed, reach and altitude. And while post-Cold War era has given us precision weapons, global ISTAR and unparalleled situational awareness, today we stand on the verge of another profound leap forward in which autonomy, AI, digitization will define the bounds of the sky. One of the key takeaways for me from the SDR is that we're not just developing niche autonomous units at the periphery of our military. Every single unit across every single service in the UK will be moving to a system of crewed, uncrewed, and autonomous systems. That is a substantial change in not just fighting doctrine, in training, in how our people come together, in how we procure. It is a fundamental change in how we will fight and how we will deter. We will deliver £1 billion in an integrated targeting web, so any sensor, any effector, any target can be struck. That is a fundamental change in how we build an integrated force, regardless of the cloth that you are wearing. Times change, but the victors in the race to dominate air power are always those who adapt first and adapt fast. Innovation, speed, and agility, the ability to outthink, outperform, and outmaneuver the enemy are the capabilities and challenges we must harness. But let's make no mistake, our adversaries are doing exactly the same. And they're seeking to hack our phones to learn what we are doing to outpace them as well. That means the UK and our allies must compete harder to have control of the air and to fight in new ways. Now, I mentioned the war in Ukraine earlier, and one of the things that is showing us is that getting new technology into the hands of warfighters fast can give you an edge on the battlefield. It's also a central message of the new UK's defence policy. Our SDR calls for investment in autonomous collaborative platforms to assure the future of UK combat air. And that can sound, to the voters I represent in Plymouth, a little bit like science fiction. But making the case that that already exists and telling the story of systems like Storm Shroud is vital to building the public support we need for this new era of autonomous systems as well. Storm Shroud is designed to disrupt enemy radar at long range, and this fleet of new autonomous wingmen drones will increase fighter jet survivability and boost our warfighting power. As an uncrewed system integrated into our new digital targeting web, it also frees up personnel to perform other vital frontline missions. And there are other ways in which Storm Shroud provides glimpses of the future. As we spend more on the military in the coming years, something that as a group of friends we are all doing, defence will increasingly become a potent engine for economic growth, an argument we must make over and over and over again. It is a license to operate. Defence is an engine for growth. Storm Shroud has already created hundreds of skilled jobs around the UK with a promise of 1,000 more in the future. And it is in contrast to the failing procurement system we inherited. Storm Shroud is an example of good practice. It has gone from factory to frontline in record time, signalling how we want to streamline procurement in the future. And I suspect that the UK is not alone in wanting to make procurement faster on a global basis. And our policy is NATO first, but it's not NATO only. The Euro-Atlantic and the Indo-Pacific and Middle East are inseparably connected. And with that, I welcome our friends from the GCAP International Government Organization, and through GCAP, Italy, Japan, and the UK are developing a supersonic stealth fighter jet. The program means our nations can come together, not just to defend the Euro-Atlantic, but to support our values on a global stage. That will bring together our industrial bases and to make sure that we are being able to provide the deterrence that we need well into the future. And this time last year, just as we're kicking off the SDR, I received a lot of questions about GCAP and our position on it. And a year later, I'm absolutely proud to stand on the same stage and say that GCAP is progressing well. It already supports 3,500 UK jobs and 1,000 apprenticeships. And last week, we cut the ribbon on GCAP's new headquarters in Reading, where hundreds of skilled personnel will be based, and the Defence Secretary met with his counterparts from Italy and Japan to plan the next phase of this programme. And at a time of rapidly changing technology, it's also essential we upgrade not just those at the tip of the spear that are able to deliver kinetic effect, it's also vital we upgrade our airborne early warning and control capabilities. The E7 Wedgetail will provide the improved performance we are looking for in the UK, offering greater speed, range, endurance, and crew capacity. And by improving detection, it provides early warning of more challenging threats at a greater distance, increasing the time available for offensive and defensive action. So boosting lethality, survivability, and resilience of our joint force. Wedgetail has also a growth path to meet the expected threat over the next 20 years and beyond. And for those at RIAT, we look forward to seeing her in the sky above the incredible air show there. So to conclude, the story of air power has always been one of constant innovation, imagination, and adaptation. That has not changed today. But we must evolve again to stay ahead of those who threaten our security. And that does mean moving on from some traditional doctrines and embracing the new. Embracing autonomy is a fundamental challenge for all our air forces, for all our procurement systems, for politicians who might be easier to make the case of a pilot in the sky, but by improving our lethality, by increasing it, we increase our deterrence. And with increased deterrence, we make more strategic dilemmas for those who seek to challenge the international order, who seek to challenge our freedom and the liberty that our people enjoy. The SDR has fired the starting pistol on that reform of the UK armed forces. And having read many of the reviews undertaken by our allies in recent months, I know similar themes are present in the new emerging defence policies that our allies in this room are developing as well. More collaborative platforms working together, more investment in our armed forces, more focus on our people. It is precisely in these ways that we will be stronger in the future to keep not only the UK strong, secure at home and strong abroad, but make sure we do so in support of all our allies as we all face similar threats from similar adversaries who fundamentally want to attack our values and our position in the world. The people in this room today have a key role in defending all those values and all our people. Thank you for what you are doing. Thank you for the pace of change that you are instigating, and keep going. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, for coming to talk to us today. Really interesting to get your take. I'd like to open the floor to questions, and please do send some to me as well on Slido. I just want to pick up on a couple of themes first before they come in. There has been concern that perhaps we could be learning the wrong lessons from Ukraine. There's a war of attrition, and by perhaps focusing on UAS and that kind of technology, we're missing the bigger picture of that real need for air superiority and that bigger push at the initial stages, and making sure that we're capable of doing that and don't get sunk into the same situation. What would you say to those concerns that have been voiced in the room?
Well, I think if NATO were to fight Russia, we would fight in a different way than Ukraine is fighting today. But there are some fundamental truths that are still there. Achieving air superiority is still vital for delivery of any successful campaign. But the tactics we're seeing are both ones that are very familiar from a century ago, the war of attrition, the artillery bombardments. But there are some fundamental changes that I think challenge some of those assumptions. Like one of the easiest ones, I think, that challenges it is, what do we mean by close and the deep? Now, that might be a concept that is said more by those people who operate land forces, but fundamentally, the close is no longer just a few dozen kilometres. It is hundreds and hundreds of kilometres due to the range of deep fire and the challenges that drones can have. And it's certainly true that if there were more artillery available in Ukraine, there would probably be more deaths from artillery than we're seeing from drones. But when 2/3 of battlefield casualties are delivered by first-person view drones, that is a fundamental challenge to how we would fight in the future. So how would we secure our forces on the ground? How would we secure, especially after Operation Spiderweb, that the Ukraine's pulled off an incredible piece of innovation, how do we secure all our airfields?
That was going to be my next question, actually.
And so in the UK, we regulate drones from 250 grams, which means the market has an enormous number of drones at 249 grams. That's not an unreasonable response to regulation, but it means that you can buy a 249-gram drone without regulation, without needing to register it, able to 3D print many of the attachments you would need to cause enormous harm. And just flying a drone on an airfield causes incredible disruption, as we have seen in recent years, not just in the UK, but across the pond in America as well. So there are some fundamental challenges, I think, about the lessons we can take, and there are many lessons we can learn from Ukraine. And some of those can be contradictory, depending on the perspective we take. But what I take from there is, if we do nothing to adapt our technologies, our procurement, then we're not going to be able to be agile. And although the Minister for Defence Procurement and Industry, who will be at RIAT this weekend, Maria Eagle, is in charge of buying stuff for the UK, I'm in charge of buying stuff for Ukraine. And what I do know is it's largely the same people that we ask to buy things quickly for Ukraine, that can buy a piece of kit on a Monday, have it shipped to Ukraine by the end of that week, and having it flying at Russians by the end of that week, that we could not do if I was buying it for a UK performance. That means we've got to change our procurement systems, because it's not an impossibility. We do it every week to support our friends.
Yes, I mean, I note that you say we have to have faster procurement, but how are you going to go about doing that?
So the new Defence Industrial Strategy will be published very shortly, and a new Defence Investment Plan by the end of this year. Fundamentally, it's about releasing the talent of our procurement agencies. So procurements that take 6 years, we want to move to 2 years. Procurements that take 2 years, we want to drop to 1 year. And for all other smaller procurements, we want to set a target of 3 months. To do that, we need to empower people to be able to remove the barriers. And one of the barriers, which is probably not a UK-specific behaviour, but is something that we are probably the world's best at, and that is changing the specifications of what we're ordering time and time and time again. So everything becomes longer and more expensive. So as a UK industry, we need to be better at setting a set of expectations, building products and platforms that enable spiral development by default, rather than with a complex add-on contract that makes it harder. And we need to be more comfortable. I think, and this perhaps doesn't apply to the high-end F-35s, Typhoons, and GCAP, but might apply to some of the autonomous systems that would fly alongside, is how do we buy 80, 90% solutions that are exportable as standard, rather than having some brilliant British Gucci piece of kit that no one else can afford to buy, and that, if honest, we can't afford to buy because we've made it so specialist. That will gain greater efficiencies across the supply chain. It will gain greater behaviour change within defence, so we can buy more stuff. But the key thing I've taken from Ukraine about this is we've got to iterate faster, because in the battlefield that we're seeing, drone technology changes every 2 to 3 weeks. That's partly because of new advanced technology, partly because the changes in the EW jammed environment that we see in Ukraine. But when I stood here a year ago, we had our drone system Watchkeeper that the army had. It was 14 years old. Now, we were not able to iterate in the right way. And what frustrated me so often is when I saw our brave men and women showing me their amazing piece of technology, they would put that amazing piece of technology back in a padded box, because that's the special place where our drones lived. Drones need to be ammunition much more. Now, there'll be some high-end drones that'll be in a different capability, which I expect padded boxes for, do not get me wrong, but far too many of our perspectives on drone technology on the basis of the broad continuum was that we must fly it and get it back and keep it safe. When in fact, actually, if we change our thought that many drones need to be ammunition, they need to be expendable, therefore we need mass production of them, we need to be able to deal with them fast, that changes how you fight, that changes how you procure, that changes the logistics stream that needs to get that to the front line, but it also changes the skills that we need for people to fly them. So lots of our RAF crews are really good at Call of Duty. I've seen them on their downtime. They're really good at that kind of stuff. Well, that's precisely the skills that we also need.
You have a ready bank of skills right across the UK in bedrooms. I can assure you of that. I just want to go quickly to some more of the other questions. Another big theme is how are we going to communicate to our public the risks of armed conflict coming to our shores for the first time since 1945? How prepared are we? I mean, here in the UK, we certainly do not have the total preparedness that you would see in Finland, for example, other Nordic countries. What are you going to do to try and bolster that defence among the civilian population?
Well, I think the total defence model that Finland has is quite incredible, and their geography really does mean that they need it, and culturally that is baked into everyone in society. Sweden has a slightly different version. Norway has one that is probably closer to where we need to aspire to get one. But one of the key themes in the Strategic Defence Review, which sometimes is the hardest one, it feels a bit like catching fog at times, is how do you create a whole of society approach? Because if we are to not only continue to have public support for increasing defence spending at a time when there's many other demands on the exchequer, we need to carry our public with us. Now that means helping them understand what steps they can take. So if everyone just updated their operating system on their laptop and their phone, our countries would be enormously safer. That's a basic thing we can do. But if you think about where we are from where we might have been decades ago, the surface area of our military is smaller. There's fewer people from the national service generation and from the conscription years of the Second World War that exist. The size of our militaries are smaller. The number of bases are fewer. So actually the surface area people can see is harder. That's why in the Defence Review, we've committed to increase the number of cadets by 30%. providing more opportunities for our young people, expanding the surface area that people can see defence doing their job. But I think it also is incumbent on defence to tell a different story. To tell a story not of expeditionary warfare, which, to be honest, since the early 2000s we have been mainly doing, is to tell a story of how our defence relies on armed forces today. So how does a Russian spy ship loitering over our critical national infrastructure in the ocean, how does that affect everyone? Well, when 97% of our data traffic goes via cables, the cloud is not in the sky, the cloud is in the sea. We've got to make those arguments to the public, and there are arguments we have to make about the change. Now, I think we can do that, and I think the public are receptive to that, but there's more we need to do.
So you talk about how defence should tell a story. One of the most popular questions that's come through is, at a time when the general public needs to fully understand the threats we face, which you've just outlined, why is the government gagging our military leaders from speaking publicly? It is not a good move at all. And I think there has been some disappointment here at the conference that quite a lot of the comments from the Royal Air Force leaders have had to be off the record. And there is concern about that because, as you say, at a time when we need to be telling this story, surely these are the representatives who are the best place to tell the story.
Yeah, I start with the principle that we need to trust our people more. Now, to do that, we have to articulate that in systems and processes. So over the last year, we've been removing restrictions of stupid rules that get in the way. Now, there is still a challenge, I think, about some of the how we define some of the classification of our comments that we want to get after. Because I agree, I want to see our military personnel to be able to tell the story. Because as much as I would like to think that I'm a trusted communicator of stuff, I'm also a self-aware politician that people don't often trust people in suits, but my word, they trust someone in uniform. And I think we've got a journey to go on there to build that confidence within the central systems. We're making progress to get there, but I think there's some more to do. But I want our people to be telling the story. But let me also say that on the stage here, there'll be a lot of people with gold braid. And there's nothing wrong with senior officers. I can see many of them in the audience at the moment. But one of the things that we must, in telling our story, we must be absolutely able to allow those people at the most junior levels of our forces to tell a story in public about why they signed up, what service means to them, as well as having senior officers be able to talk about the geostrategic implications of a weapon system or a change of global posture in some way. We need both those stories to be told, and that means
there's a great squadron that does that, 7644 Squadron, the Royal Auxiliary Air Force. I was a member of it, and that's one of the key things that we have always done, is to really try and get all those stories out from the grassroots up. So let's just move on to some other questions. Why does defence procurement take so long? The medium-lift helicopter programme was looking for an off-the-shelf replacement for Puma, but a replacement hasn't been selected, let alone ordered.
So all the major procurements will be set out in the Defence Investment Plan that will be published in the autumn. We inherited, frankly, I mean, the basic question, why does defence procurement take so long? It's an incredibly fair question. It's one that in opposition we ask time and time again. Now we're in government saying, look, we don't accept this type of the slow pace. But the slow pace is a result of decisions that load in extra levels of risk, decisions that load in so many opportunities to revisit the spec that we're ordering. We need to get faster at procurement in terms of contracting. So not just the competition, the innovation that comes in there, the basic contracting in terms of the terms and conditions is too slow. And that's why the changes that we're setting out, that we've set out already in defence reform, because increased defence spending has to come with defence reform at the same time. You can't just pour more money on the same system and expect a different result. We're making changes to that. A new empowered National Armaments Director is a key part of that to cut through the changes. And even the interim National Armaments Director, Andy Start, before the new final appointment is made, has made big changes in the way that defence equipment and support our procurement agencies working, partly because they've now got the political top cover to make bigger changes. And they've got a defence review that says we have to go faster, not just in an abstract way, but saying we have to go faster because there is an immediate risk to us and our national security. So therefore, this isn't just go faster because we'd like to get some good headlines. It's go faster because we need more capability We need to fill the capability gaps that we inherited because we need to deter aggression and defeat it if necessary, and that's not that far away. So in my mind, defence procurement has to be one of those areas that we go after much harder, and that's what the Defence Industrial Strategy, when it comes out very shortly, will be saying. And I suspect our defence industries will absolutely welcome that, because the frustrations I see from them sometimes is in the slow, laborious processes that government has put in place. Now, we want to speed those up. And if we don't speed those up, we won't get the kit and equipment we need to our front line in time to do the deterrence that we need.
Okay, thank you. This is going back, this next question, to a point we was making earlier about, are we going to be learning the wrong lessons from Ukraine? Justin Bronk says, is there a risk in relying too heavily on mass cheap drones for lethality against Russian forces, given that Russia fields the best counter-drone capabilities in the world, has 3.5 years of combat experience refining that, and Ukraine's 1 million+ drones per year is not delivering victory?
No, but it has not delivered victory for Putin either. And I think that's absolutely worth remembering, in the fact that Putin thought the war in Ukraine was going to be over in 3 days. And it has not been. 3 years on, they're still fighting. I think we have to, my general principle in politics is the answer's and rather than or normally. It makes it hard to fit in the soundbite when you have to say it's this and this and this and this. But when you talk about lessons learned from Ukraine, yes, of course we need to invest more in deep strike. Yes, that's there. We have to invest more in air superiority. Yes, of course, we have to learn more in terms of drone technology and counter-UAS as well. All those things are true at the same time. And I think what we're seeing in the defence reviews, not just in the UK, but elsewhere around the world with our key allies, is that there's a commonality of the understanding of the challenge. Because certainly the idea that we are fighting, or we need to deter a Russia as it was prior to the Ukraine war, the latest invasion of Ukraine, is not right. We need to be able to match our forces against a different type of Russian posture and experience, and battle-hardened experience. Because one of the things I'm very mindful of when you play forwards what I hope will be a peace in Ukraine coming soon is not just the work that we're doing with our allies on the Coalition of the Willing. We're very grateful for the support of our colleagues in terms of especially the provision of air power into that, because that will be the first units that will be used in the Coalition of the Willing due to the speed of deployment. But it's the fact that at that point, Russia will be able to redistribute their forces along the eastern flank again. So actually, peace may not necessarily mean the absence of war. It might mean rising issues for many of our NATO friends along the eastern flank. So we've got to learn that, because those troops on the other side of the NATO boundary, they will know how to defend against drones. They will know how to maximise drones. They'll know how to do so in conjunction with deep strike, glide bombs, and all the other tactics we're seeing played out. That's why, taken together, we've got to learn those lessons. But I'm confident, from what I am seeing from the change in the UK armed forces and change from our, in particular, NATO allies, that we've got an idea of this and we've got a clear plan to get there.
Great, thank you. I just want to take a question from the floor. If there's any questions, yes, go ahead. Yes, you did it too. Go ahead. Oh, right. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, it's Chris Pocock. I'm a former defence editor and I'm now a writer and commentator. Integrated air and missile defence. We have a patchwork of capabilities now, nothing like total coverage of the UK.
Yep.
Is that even desirable, given that it was going to cost a great deal of money, especially if we're going to also seek exo-atmospheric interception?
So we need to invest more in integrated air missile defence. The SDR is clear on that. We need to look at not just the provision of ground-based interceptor units that we have a very small number of, you're right, and we have many of those already deployed in our operations forward. But we also need to look at new technologies to get there. Drone-based interceptors are a cheaper way of doing it. Certainly, if we're intercepting missiles that cost a few 100,000 with missiles that cost millions, there's an economics here that we have to be aware of. I'm also, as a Navy brat myself, I should admit to the room, I'm quite excited about the deployment of directed energy weapons. And so the SDR sets out the Dragonfire system as a funded platform now rather than an unfunded one we inherited, a directed energy system that will be deployed to 4 of our Royal Navy destroyers, helping to create more layered air defence in terms of what the bubble that a destroyer can pop up. That testing of that technology alongside other bits is just one part of what needs to be a fuller platform, but there's money that's been invested in integrated air defence in the SDR that takes us beyond where we were previously. But we also need to make sure that what the UK is doing is entirely joined up with our NATO allies, because although you can see a missile threat to the UK coming from any compass point, in majority of the most likely scenarios of missiles coming at the UK or an air threat to the UK, it will have crossed or come near to a NATO ally as well. So that's why working with Norway in the High North, our Nordic partners, our Jeff partners in particular in that respect, I think is absolutely vital. I'm seeing lots of extraordinary good work and good innovation from all those partners. So there is more to do there, but we also mustn't buy into the approach that suggests that there is a golden dome, an iron dome option that is immediately available off the shelf or cheap and cheerful. We need to get from where we are to where we need to be. There's steps that we need to take to get there. We're making some progress. We need to do a lot more, and the Defence Investment Plan at the end of the year will set out more investment in those technologies and those platforms we need to buy.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the question. Thank you. And that is all we have time for. I'd like to thank the Minister for your time today and for answering all of those questions. It's been great to have you here at the conference. Thank you.